Here.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Here.
Commissioner Gormley,
Here.
Commissioner Fuchs,
Hello, Patrick. No
Can't hear
voice.
you.
we see him. And Commissioner Christensen.
Here.
Thank you, Trina. We have a full commission this evening. Our first item of business this evening is our consent agenda. We have 3 items on that. Minutes of our previous meeting dated June 16th, 2020. The purchase of a transmission bucket truck and approval to receive electronic bankruptcy notices. Is there anyone on the commission that would like to take anything off of the consent agenda?
No, thank you.
I'll move for the adoption of the consent agenda then.
And a second?
Second?
Been moved by Ed and seconded by Tom. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, by saying nay? It looks like the consent agenda passes unanimously this evening. The next item that we have is accounts payable. And we have the report there. Any questions or feedback from commission on the accounts payable and purchasing reports?
No.
No.
Okay. That takes us to our next area of consultant and partner reports. And I see Brent, you're on the line. So Brent, if you could update us on your report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The 721 road sale is entirely complete. I think next month we'll have the official numbers, but they're completely done. Roughly 400 loads were shipped to Herbert and a few other destinations. Estimated volume and value came out about 7%. It's looking like under the original estimates. So we'll know next month exactly. And of course,
See you in the
Herbert
morning.
will be owed.
Tim, I'm
What's
parked
that?
out front.
Go ahead, Brent.
Okay, sorry. I thought Ed was talking there.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So next month we'll figure out exactly what Herbert is owed back because they paid, advance payments because of the 2-year contract. So I'll know that exact number next month. But the sale came out real good, but just a little bit under the original estimates. 2020 sales, Luway is all but complete on the 107 road. I was out there today. They just have a few loads left to ship. They're filing slash and cleaning up the unit. Estimated volume on that one to date is nearly on target with our original estimates, and so should have final numbers together on that one next month as well. The Boundary 300 Bald Mountain Road sale was 3 units. 2 are complete, and they weren't sure when they logged that 3rd one. They have until next year, but it looks like I talked to them today. They are going to move in and wrap that up this year. So the next few months they'll be wrapping up the Boundary Road unit, and looks like we're on target with our estimates for volume and value on that sale as well. Fire season, as is often the case, started right before 4th of July. We're currently at a level 1, which is the low fire hazard level, and did a fire inspection with Luway today on their fire equipment, and they're all squared away, and the water and light fire truck is at the treatment plant. So we're all set for fire season, but looking like a pretty moderate fire season. So we hope that holds up. Any questions?
Let's open it up. Any questions for Brent?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Brent, for your report.
All right, thanks a lot.
Good night.
That will take us next to appearance request, and I don't see any. Staff reports, I don't see any. And old business, I do not see any. That takes us next business. And the first thing that we have on the new business agenda this evening is our cyber risk insurance renewal. And I see Gary's on the line with us. And then, so Mark, I'll turn it over to you to introduce this topic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we had our insurance renewal at the last commission meeting. One policy doesn't renew until August on the 19th. And so we discussed that policy. The cyber liability policies from Philadelphia Insurance is who we've been insured through. And so Mr. Eastland joins us tonight to talk about either renewing that policy or he was able to find another insurance provider that had very favorable rates with comparable coverage. And so I'll turn it over to Gary and he can explain that. And we're ultimately looking for direction on which policy the commission would want us to move forward with for cyber liability insurance.
Thank you, Mark. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mark. I want to thank you all for letting me go out or bring to you this option for your consideration. I wanted to kind of give a little background here. This cyber policy was purchased back in 2014 when Sam was in negotiations on a contract which required some cyber liability, and we only had I believe at that time we had either 25,000 or 50,000 built into the CIS program, and they required a $2 million limit. So we went out and obtained the policy through Philadelphia, which provides coverage for a variety of different cybersecurity exposures. Since then, the cyber market has gotten extremely competitive. There's a number of different markets that are getting very aggressive on their pricing and also their coverages. And so last year we looked at raising the limits on our CIS policy, which was a pretty reasonable price, but a maximum they could get is 1 million. So it was still 1 million short of the requirements of the contract. And so this year now we've got a quote from it's called HDI, which is a admitted carrier in Oregon, A+ rating, very strong. And like I said, they're very aggressive in this marketplace right now. What they brought forward is a price-wise, the quote that's in your packet there for $3,760. And then you have to add a $300 broker fee for the broker who placed this, which is who I work with. So this is the total premium being just over $4,000. The renewal that we just received on Friday, I believe you got that in the packet, didn't you, Mark?
Yeah.
Was $13,881 with Philadelphia, and that's actually up from $11,900 and some dollar. I think it was $11,900. So it's up a couple $100, which is what we expected, is that it would probably go up slightly. So the question then being is the coverages the same and how do they compare? Actually, the coverages are even broader than Philadelphia's with regard to the limits. The Philadelphia policy had some sublimits in place on some coverages, which I'm not going to go too deep on this, but there was $2 million coverage on cyber extortion, $2 million on network security. And these are the primary areas that a cybersecurity policy covers. The HDI policy includes $2 million on those items. Now, there are some sublimits on the Philadelphia policy, $500,000 for loss of digital assets. The HDI goes full limits on that, so it's covered up to $2 million. The non-physical business interruption is $500,000 on the Philadelphia policy. This is HDI is full limits, which is $2 million. The security event cost is $500,000 on the Philadelphia. That's a full limits of $2 million on the HDI policy. Now, it's almost impossible for you to look at these two quotes and see how those compare. Tom, I'm sure you read them cover to cover, right?
I did read the stuff you gave us, Gary.
And but you can see that they don't even use the same terminology.
Right. I was asking questions.
So it's almost impossible without getting a mapping which shows exactly which coverages are where. So you kind of have to go on my word, but I will provide you with a map basis if that would help you with your decision making. But that said, I do not see any weaknesses in the HDI. I do expect the cyber market to get more expensive in years to come. It's kind of like earthquake coverage. It was relatively cheap for many years, and now it's almost unavailable. And so I think cyber is, they haven't even scratched the surface on what the exposures are. They don't even know what's out there yet. So, but these companies are committed to it, and I feel like this is a good alternative. And the only thing I would probably say, maybe somewhere, maybe not this year, but considering somewhere down the road, is as we find out what exposures we have, you may want to consider higher limits, because when a cyber claim does come into the picture, it sometimes could be $100 million, but like the Target situation. But obviously, I don't see those exposures with water and light. But then again, I don't even know exactly what we're going to see in the next 5 years. So we'll kind of keep an eye on it. But for now, this would be a good opportunity for you to get into a market that is growing, that does offer higher limits if you want them, and the pricing is very competitive at the moment.
So any questions for Gary? Gary, you indicated that you would be willing to do a mapping between the two policies.
Yeah, only if you're willing to read it. It does take a little bit of work, but I can do that. And the thing about it is, what I would do is ask the underwriter to do it for me. But it does get a little bit confusing. I think the real thing is to read through, and Patrick, you probably have seen a lot of these coverage lines, and I think in the HDI quote on page 2 of 9, you can see it's a little bit, this is a more updated, I guess you'd say, an acceptable language that you're going to see in almost every policy now. And so I think what I would recommend is go into that, and then if you want to see where, because there is no question on limits really. The main question would be, okay, but this Philadelphia policy includes all these other things like non-physical, or electronic media liability coverage. Where is that in this HDI policy? Well, that would fall underneath the network security liability. So how do I know that? I mean, that's you actually you have some network security on this one also. So it does get very confusing. What's all lumped together? But I do feel comfortable getting you a map and then allowing you to dive into it a little bit deeper. The other thing that's really key here, you note on the Philadelphia policy that there's a continuity date and a retroactive date. So if you had had an event in the prior 6 years that hadn't really maybe resulted in any claims, we would want to make sure we know about it, because we might not want to switch, is what I'm saying. The HDI policy does cover full prior acts, so we don't necessarily have to buy a tail or extended reporting form from the Philadelphia policy, unless there's something that's happened that's been reported to Philadelphia that we haven't, maybe either it wasn't a claim or it did not rise to a claim. So I would think the real key there is, if you've had any kind of an event which you just don't know what might come of it, that would be I would probably hesitate to say, let's make a move. But usually these type of events, although they could lodge probably something within your system and lay it dormant for a number of years, it's unless you know about something right now, that type of event would be covered. It's just the ones that may have been reported, but nothing has been risen to the claim level, that we would have to be cautious if we proceed. Yes.
Again, any questions for Gary, and what direction would the commission have us take?
So Gary, you're right. I noticed that you couldn't tell from reading it what the coverage was, but this is something that you're familiar with and and you understand this?
Yes, I'm very comfortable with it. We actually just wrote the same policy for the city of McMinnville. And they didn't, they were relying entirely on the small limits that were available within CIS. And they were very comfortable moving forward with this product. And I wasn't at the city council meeting. I don't think it was probably discussed in great detail, but the city manager and the finance director all met with me, and we went through all the questions, and they were the ones that made that decision. So this would be nice. It's be good to have the coverage with the same carrier, just because it's primarily the same entity. That's just an observation.
But to make sure I understood correctly, you are comfortable that the coverage is, if it's not exactly comparable, it doesn't leave out anything. It does not leave out anything that's very important to us if we take the lower price one.
That's true. And actually, it's got better limits on social engineering, which is probably the most, you probably heard the most about social engineering, in that that's anytime somebody is lured into doing something, whether it's money or a contract or something that holds the entity liable. Or actually allows you to depart. We used to call it trick and device, where it could involve like a bounce check, or even, you know, something where a fake title on a car. In this case, where it usually comes into play is somebody who has the authorization to write a payment to a subcontractor, which may have already been paid, but they track it, and then they'll come back and say, and it'll be on the letterhead of somebody with the authority to say, hey, we need to get that check over to Brent or to whoever, because the other check was voided and I forgot to tell you, and I'm out of town for a couple of days. So could you send them over that $50,000, $100,000? And that's the type of thing that is very common right now. And so that's covered up to the full 2 million limits on this policy, where it would have been on the other one. It's I believe that one was 250,000 on the other one.
And Gary, so the only question would be not something that happened in the past, because the prior acts covers that.
Right.
Something that we knew about and didn't disclose to them.
Exactly. Or it just hasn't come to the surface of a claim, but you knew about the event. So that is the key. You can't, it has to have occurred prior. But this could actually cover something that occurred prior to 2014, because it's full prior act. So it's even broader in that regard.
So have you talked to our staff about what that could be and how far down that knowledge goes?
No, and that's something that I would definitely recommend going through. I don't know who would be involved at that level, but that's something I would have Mark or Sam or basically talk to anybody in the IT department and say, have we had a breach or any kind of a situation or event, even though it didn't lead to anything, but it could have, it could raise the question later as to some kind of a cyber threat, which would be like a cyber extortion is probably the biggest concern, is where they have, what is the terminology, Patrick, where they come in and they actually freeze up and encrypt your entire database, and
Ransomware.
Right? Okay, that type of thing, and they come back and then they say, we'll de-encrypt it, but you have to pay the ransom. And it's possible though that they have that in place now, but they haven't come back they haven't encrypted you yet. And but there are signs for that sort of thing, and that's what you'd want to ask. Is there anything that's been spotted within your system that would throw up a red flag?
So, and what's the renewal date on this? When do we have to decide by?
August 19th.
Okay, so
We have a month then to look at it.
Yeah.
what's the date of our next meeting, please, Trina?
It's the 18th is the next meeting.
Okay, so we could do that. Okay. And it sounds as if you'd want to talk to finance and also IT and
Yeah.
probably all the department managers too, right?
Yeah, and I think if Mark or somebody could take the lead on that and just perhaps Patrick would have some kind of a guideline, or just basically get the wording proper so that whoever in the IT department is working know what they're looking for. That would be helpful.
And Gary, I think it'd be helpful if you work with Patrick on it, because Patrick, understands all the risks and the IT and all that stuff, but I'm not sure he understands the insurance company issues.
Yes, and that would be fine, Patrick, if you want me to include, if you want to work together. But once again, I think just a matter of a couple of emails sent out to all the department heads or anybody that's involved with the IT systems. And then if we do get into an IT question and that Patrick could help clarify, that would be great.
John, is it very hard to get Mike Paulson back?
We'd have to check. I don't know if he's available or not. He was talking about going on some hike for a while. I don't know if that actually
So he would certainly have the history, because he was on ground zero.
But we could have Thad follow up with him.
Correct.
Great. Because all that testing we did too, and we'd want to make sure that there wasn't something in that, and I don't want to discuss the details of the testing in the open session.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But I do think that anything like that you're right on. That's exactly what we'd want to look at. Because if there is something hanging out there that we may be aware of as a result of that testing, but we are just waiting for something to happen, that would be a case where you might not want to make a move away from this.
Well, and we've done so much due diligence since we've put that focus on cybersecurity, and that's been over the last, 2.5 years.
And Gary, to make sure I understand it, even if staff is confident that nothing will come of it, that there's a very minuscule chance of something come of it, we still need to disclose that, right?
Well, if there's, and the thing about it is, it might not be a case of, if you suspect something happened, that doesn't mean that there's been a claim or that it would disqualify a claim under the new policy. It's not. It's just if there is some evidence, some actual hard evidence that that the system had been breached, even though there was no known damages or known occurrences of a claim that would actually cause concerns. That would be something we would definitely want to. That would be a good discussion. I would probably say let's hold tight, because we've got a situation that you might want to wait a year, because you could always make this decision a year down the road too. I expect these options to be available, but you don't want to walk away from a policy you've had in force since 2014 that would definitely not question a claim. That's always the hardest part.
Gary, what if you bought both policies? The second one being that it's got such much higher limits. Do they subrogate each other, or?
Actually, no, there's a trigger in there what you can do, because one will accept it and the other will deny it. The definition of the claim is going to be the same in both policies. So what you would do is buy the tail coverage, which is an option, and it's built right into the policy itself. Usually it's about 1 times the annual premium, and it covers you up to like another 12 months or maybe 24 months, depending on the policy itself. So, but that, that's in a pretty significant cost. So and to do that, you would buy the renewal, or not the renewal, basically what you would pay is last year's premium. And it's the formula in it is, I'm looking at the policy right now to see if I can see real quick. It's 100% annual premium for a 12-month period to purchase the extended reporting period. So that means if you paid $12,000 last year, you can buy the tail for whatever the total premium was last year. Then this policy would stop from this point forward going, and the new policy would start from this point forward. But you would have that extended reporting period for any claims that have occurred but now not reported under the old policy. And then you would have the new policy for any claims that would not be triggered under the old policy. So it would give you a little bit of a redundancy, but and a significant cost, but it's definitely the safest way to go.
So there's no automatic tail coverage.
30 days.
Okay,
Usually it's 30 or 60, but I'm pretty sure it's 30 on this one. So it's called a 30-day extended reporting period, and then you can purchase up to 12 months.
and Gary, if the company we're thinking about changing to's premiums went way up and we had to go to another company, we'd have this same problem with the tail coverage, right?
Yes, absolutely. They're all the same as far as the coverage forms, partially being the liability form, because see, this is a two-part coverage. These policies are a combination of first party, because they provide some coverage for your own personal data, your own personal cost, the regulatory requirement cost, plus a third party where somebody,
Right.
you lose their information and they get damaged and sue you. So that's the part. It's the third party coverage is subject to tail, not the first party.
Okay, okay. And if you do your investigation with Patrick's help and the staff's help, and they come up with a recommendation on the 18th, do we have time to make the decision?
Yes, I just alert the company HDI that you are going to make your decision on the 18th, and they have the authority to bind coverage on the 19th, which would be 12:01 a.m. Then we would cancel the Philadelphia policy or just purchase the tail, whichever you decide to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions of Gary? So, Mark, do you have a direction that we'd like to do? Do you understand?
Yep.
Okay. Gary, thank you as always for looking out for our best interest and representing us well. Thank you.
Thanks for allowing me to do that, and I'll just look to hear from you, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Gary.
I'm going on vacation, so I'll see you later.
Okay.
Bye.
The next item is we have COVID-19 update, extension of emergency declaration. And so, John, I'll turn that over to you.
Sure. So I'll just touch the highlights on the memo. Staffing levels, we actually went backward, and the staff that we actually had in the facility returning, we moved them back to at-home work. So those staffing levels have been reduced in the building. We've actually changed our protocols as well. So everybody, that we do a health screening every morning for all employees that coming in the facility. We've also made the building a one-way in and out to reduce the potential contact with staff as they move through the building. Construction projects, as you probably know, we are supplying Lafayette with water now. That project was started supplying water for Lafayette on July 8th. And if I remember correctly, we've supplied so far over 400,000 gallons to the city of Lafayette.
Great.
So that's continuing. Front office, we still have the front office closed. Staff is still available to take customer calls. You can see credit card payments have increased substantially over June of last year. Financial impacts, you can see the fees waived. To date, we are about $163,000 is what we've waived in credit card fees, reconnect fees, late penalties, and delinquencies. And we are still working the 410 schedule. We are actually doing a staff survey right now on that to see where how staff feels about that schedule and continuing that. And then included is a resolution for continuation of the emergency with one significant change, and that would be starting up disconnects again. First part, basically with a 3-week education period after this meeting, and then we would be starting those disconnects sometime around August 12th, I believe. And the goal here is we have a significant number of customers that have not paid since January. So actually even before this event started. And what we were trying to do is get them to communicate with us. And they have not been communicating with us. And our goal here is not to disconnect them for non-payment, but is to get them to make a payment arrangement with us. Those customers have not made any contact with us, and their bills are becoming substantial. So, anything you want to add to that resolution, Sam?
The resolution you see in front of you, it mirrors, mirrors the right word, but it looks a lot like the original resolution. So instead of just adopting an extension, what we presented to you is another fully stated emergency resolution, most of which does in fact repeat what was in the original resolution. We've added some information on page 2 about increased residential disconnection, increased delinquencies of those. And then we've asked the commission to consider some additional authorizations in the resolutions to authorize disconnection, as John explained, with certain limitations. And as you can see in the, as you also can see in the resolution, it permits and directs this general manager of Water Light to authorize time payment arrangements or time payment agreements. So that would be something that we would, I understand, we'd be extending to customers as a way to avoid disconnection.
Okay.
So any questions from the commission to John or Sam?
So Ed, go ahead.
I'm fine.
Oh, okay. So John, as I understand it, when I read the part about your disconnect, authorizing a disconnect, says only when you reasonably determine the customer is unwilling to enter and perform the agreement. So that would mean that we're trying to keep the people from digging a deeper hole for themselves, right? And also to prevent problems for us in the future. So if somebody weren't paying, you're going to contact them, and if they don't respond and they just refuse to respond, there'll be further warnings and finally a disconnect, right?
Correct.
But if the people do respond, then they'll be given opportunities to set up a time payment plan or to access YCAP funds or our customer helping customer funds.
Correct.
And only if they aren't willing to enter into any kind of reasonable plan. And it could be, I guess if somebody's income is low enough, it could be just a few dollars. If they're still not, let's say they're a self-employed person and this unemployment still hasn't come through, and then then at that point, we would expect that they wouldn't get cut off if they came in with a very low budget, because I don't think we want to cut somebody off where, the choice is, our services or food for their kids.
Right. And then I'll also add that there's another $15 million available in LIHEAP funding now as well. So on top of the normal funding. So they are going to do that as direct grants to people that qualify.
And so obviously we're going to tell people about that.
Correct.
And that'll be sort of the possibility of this will be in the information you give them, so before they get a disconnect notice, they know there are these other chances, right?
Correct, because that's what we'll do is we'll give a letter basically stating what they owe and then what options they would have.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm good.
So I'm prepared to vote if we need a motion or something, or it's a
Yeah,
resolution.
so Trina, do you have a number available?
17.
So this is 2020-17 resolution number, a resolution by the city of McMinnville, a municipal corporation, state of Oregon, acting by and through its Water and Light Commission, declaring a state of emergency with regards to the operation of the water and light plants of the city of McMinnville. That's 2020-17.
Thank you, Sam.
I move adoption.
Second.
And so Tom moved for adoption. Ed seconded. Trina, could you poll the commission?
Mayor Hill,
Yes.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Yes.
Commissioner Gormley,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuchs. He says yes. Commissioner Christensen.
Yes.
So resolution 2020-17 passes unanimously. Thank you. John, I have one other question. You know, in your memo, when we were looking at total fees that were waived, I know some of those are unearned expenses, but are any of those recoupable under the CARES Act that is coming through the government and through the state?
So we actually have submitted for the credit card fees.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yep.
That takes us to item number C, a request to set a public hearing for water rates. And so Mark, could you go over that item for us?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, Utility Financial Solutions performed a water cost of service analysis for us, and the result of that was a 5-year rate design that recommended both water consumption and meter charge increases that would commence beginning October 1st, 2018, and each year thereafter through 2022. And first and second year of those changes, those increases were implemented. In order to consider the third year of the rate design recommended change in rates, a public hearing would need to be held on September 15th that would enable the rate date of October 1st, 2020. So that's requesting that commission consider setting a public hearing for on the water rate changes for September 15th this year.
I'd so move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Patrick or Jody.
Patrick, any further discussion?
One other item, John, our regional water meeting today, Carlton actually surprised me in saying we want to talk to you about that piece of paper. So will Mr. Beaucamp have any thing to do with helping us establish a rate for that, or is that pretty much going to be negotiated by us?
That's going to be negotiated by us, and I think I'd like to have a conversation with you about that
Sure.
before we have that.
Okay. I can report later on the meeting about the meeting today. So,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. So it looks like we'll move forward with a public hearing scheduled for September 15th, 2000.
Did we vote? Yeah, we did, didn't? Okay, yeah.
We did.
Did we vote?
Nope.
We did.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so we will set the public hearing for water rate increases September 15th, 2020. Thank you, Mark, for that. James, the closeout of the Lafayette finished water transmission main project. Turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. So staff's in the process of closing out that Lafayette finished main project. As John mentioned, McMinnville Water Night began providing water to the city of Lafayette the first week of July. Since then, we've provided approximately 400,000 gallons of water. So the coordination has worked out really well. I think my feedback from Lafayette's been all positive. In order to move forward with proceeding with the project closeout, staff's requesting commission adopt the resolution to approve and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign change order number 1, and for staff to provide the city of Lafayette notice of final cost under the terms of the water purchase agreement. Attached to the memo, attached to the resolution is Exhibit 1, which is a change order for a credit in an amount of $3,788.43. The change order amends the contract agreement with K&E Excavation and changes the contract price to $1,939,971.57. Also attached is Exhibit number 2 to the resolution, which is the calculation for Lafayette's total cost for the project, which is under budget. It's it is $1,529,382.07. So the final amount for Lafayette is, approximately $96,000 under the total cost. That is basically comes from Santec Engineering and the construction contract with K&E. And I'd like to open it up for questions at this point, if you have any questions in regards to those 2 attachments.
No questions.
I have a quick question if nobody else does.
Go ahead.
Item 7, we've eliminated 3 butterfly valves. I mean, does that matter?
It doesn't, well, it does matter. The reality of it is with COVID, we weren't able to get those valves. We kept asking the supplier where they're at with them, and the reality is they were never going to supply them to us. So we had 3 different suppliers for the butterfly valves, and with the COVID-19 situation, we were short on those. What we did instead is we asked for a credit, so we canceled the 3 butterfly valves, got a credit back, and then put spools in place. So in the future, if we choose to come back and drop in valves, we have a place to drop in valves there.
And
So
is that for us or for Lafayette's benefit? The valve?
it's for our benefit, just to isolate the pipe out there.
So is this something we need to have a deal with Lafayette that if we decide we need to do this, they'll pay us for it? Or is this something that we're going to use the pipe for our own purposes?
I don't see a need to put the valves in the future. After going through it and working out, we basically did Santec did a really nice job going back and redesigning it. At this point, I think where the valves are, working with the operation crew, I'm satisfied where we have it and how the project came out. So I don't see in the future the need, but when I say future, I'm talking very far down the road. You're talking 30, 40, 50 years maybe. So right now we have the proper valves in place.
So these valves would just have let us isolate chunks of the pipe if there was a problem, and now we're going to have to turn off more of the pipe. Is that what? Do I understand that?
Well, it allowed you to isolate in certain locations. So we kept the key valves. So what we did is like for example, at the west intertie, we had a valve there we eliminated. That was one for future down the road expansion, but it was more of a constructability valve. So we got rid of that one. That was in the future if we wanted to tie into it on the west end. Moving down, we kept the valves at Loop Road because we wanted for future tie-in to that piece. So we have 3 24-inch valves there. We kept a valve near the guardrail in case we had to isolate those pieces there. So we have that section of pipe isolated at the guardrail. And then we go all the way down to the pump station at the very end there for future tie-in. We have 3 valves down there. So with all that being said, going through we did a lot of design work to make this work. I'm happy with the number of valves we have in the system currently.
Okay.
James, maybe it would make it easier for the board to understand if you did a single line drawing showing where the valves were and where they were eliminated, maybe on a piece 8.5 and 11 or 11 by 17 piece of paper.
Yeah,
we don't have to do it right now, but I mean, just so everyone is comfortable with what your decision is.
Yeah, I'll be clear. It wasn't my decision. I mean, we were all part of the decision in regards to working through it, but this was this got sent through Santec. We worked with the contractor on it. There's a lot of, just due to COVID, there's a lot of changes out there on the project, but.
And you advised us you were having delivery issues.
Yeah, and honestly, at the very end of it, we had to make a call because we were sitting out there and we waited to the very last day to make that call. And we had to call the supplier, and they still at the very end said, yeah, they'll probably come. And then we never got any notice on it. And the reality was from Ferguson, who was the suppliers, there's no intention to supply those valves. They just weren't there. So, and we're not the only ones. I mean, it's not like our project was the only one affected by this. There's numerous projects out there. Even the pump station for Lafayette has some issues there. But I'm with everything that went on there. I honestly think with the type of material pipe we chose, the valves, Santec was heavily involved in the field on these changes. I feel really comfortable how we went out there and made these modifications. So, but yeah, I can send out tomorrow just a drawing of where we eliminate them and go from there.
So James, to make sure I'm clear about this, it sounds to me as if you guys did the right thing, that you didn't have any choice, that we didn't want to stop the project for valves that may not come this year. So I think you did the right thing, and I'm sure that you and Santec and engineered it correctly. My only concern is if because of COVID we had to leave something out that Lafayette will not pay for now, and would normally be something that would be appropriate to have in the project, and it's not just something for our benefit, but except that we're the ones that have to maintain the pipe and deal with it. If that's the case, I think we ought to talk to Lafayette about saying, if this ever needs to be fixed, you guys have to contribute. That's what I'm getting at. So in other words, not that you did something wrong, but is that if Lafayette pays less money now because of the COVID situation, and it turns out in 5 years or 10 years we have to put these valves in, then they ought to pay to put the valves in. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. Absolutely.
Can I make a suggestion?
I understand your point on that. Sorry, go ahead, Ed.
Sam, could we do an electronic vote on this and then the mayor and clerk sign it?
Well, I have a better idea. Ed, I'm comfortable with your expertise, and so I would suggest that we authorize this subject to Ed being comfortable with being no need to bill Lafayette for it, and if there is, then we need to talk about it.
I will tell you that Preston today did a big shout out. He was so thrilled to have the project, under budget and on time. So I have found him to be an extremely reasonable person. He certainly would have to say the same about us. So, I mean, I want to see this drawing, and then I can answer your question, Tom, without seeing the drawing.
Yeah.
If there's a point 50 years from now, then you're right. It should have been plugged in there. But I mean, and the answer is we had to deal with the moment. This was almost like a force majeure situation. So.
No, exactly. No. I mean, that's fine. And 50 years, I don't care about really.
And I think we have a good enough relationship with Preston that we can go back to them.
So can I ask a clarifying question? My assumption is that we have an ongoing relationship with the city of Lafayette. If an issue came up, there's something. There's a professional relationship between Water and Light and the city of Lafayette. If there had to be a repair made, there would be a negotiation there. Is that right? No?
I think we have language in our contract actually directs how we handle those kinds of things. In our
then wouldn't this particular
or use agreement where we sell them water and stuff. So because this pipeline is not the end of it. I mean, we're financing it for them, but we're also there's language about the ongoing maintenance of the system.
So wouldn't the butterfly, sorry, what are they called? Butterfly joints?
They're valves. They're shut off.
Would those not be part of that in a future discussion 30 years down the road if something needed to happen?
Well, engineers do a lot of redundant things, and it's kind of a CYA situation often. And I will tell you, our staff historically over the years has been much more frugal in how they design stuff, and they design it based on the fact that they've maintained it and know for all those bugaboos. So without looking at the drawing, I don't want to be critical but I do I mean, I knew these were late and I'm hearing about all kinds of projects with equipment problems and the underlying issue was we were to get water to Lafayette by a certain date. And I mean, the decisions that were made were that we had to make that. That's just, and to that end, then if we need to put these in, then we go back to Preston and say, here's the situation. I feel comfortable about that.
But Sam, as I recall the contract, and I haven't looked at it in a while, once this happens, we assume responsibility for maintenance of everything and any changes or whatever it is up to the point of delivery, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things you want to keep in mind. One, yes, we own the pipe to the pump station, and so we will maintain it. And that's part of that. That was part of the negotiation. We did not want to forego owning. We own it, and that's part of the strength and part of the weakness of responsibility. And so there's that. The other thing is with regards to the decisions about change orders. The contract provides we have nearly unreviewable discretion to make change orders. And so that was also something we were intent on negotiating in the contract. Again, that kind of comes with a good and a bad. If the change orders had come back and we had larger expenses above and beyond what the contract price was, Lafayette would have suffered those. Our costs really were capped at the bid difference. And so we were largely protected. And I think James did a fantastic job of managing costs and keeping those costs down and really maintaining our long-term relationship with Lafayette. That's more of a policy statement than a financial one. But I think we had a lot of control in this project. But with that control, there's sort of the downside to it. And the downside is we're making those decisions. But Lafayette was either going to pay or not pay, both on both ends of that equation. So when that decision was made, that decision benefited Lafayette. I think that's what the contract would say. And so to answer Commissioner Christensen's question, yeah, the ongoing maintenance costs we will pay those, and it's built in. We're being paid. We're paying 1.5 times our retail rate for water, and we're being paid a minimum. We have a minimum charge. So those are and we're paying $750,000 roughly for, I don't know, James, I forget how much pipe this is, but you've told me repeatedly that we're actually receiving a heck of a good deal here. But so I think those are all things to keep in mind when you're looking at this.
But I will also mention that since we didn't put those 3 valves in, we also don't bear the maintenance costs down the road.
Right.
So what we did is we looked at where the strategic points were where we wanted valves.
So what I can say in the valves is we have a number of them in there, and the ones we took out were the ones that are mostly in line. The critical valves are still all there. We had lots of valves, many valves, and I think it's over 10 valves we have in a 7,500 lineal foot pipe there. The critical valves are there. Worst case scenario, I mean, the valves are there to isolate the system. We have isolation out there. It's just longer stretches now. So you have to drain the pipe longer. So if the pipe down the road breaks, we have to isolate it for whatever reason, it takes longer. We have the isolation valves there. It's mostly for, the amount of water going through the pipe if it does break in the future or something happens. The critical valves are there. I mean, we met all the standards. On the valve piece, I feel really comfortable in the valve piece, but we can send it over to Ed and I can give you a look and show you what we eliminated there. There's a lot of thought put into it. So I'd be happy to share that.
The other thing, just to give you a little perspective on a different note, was John asked Preston a couple of times today about water restrictions, and it relates to Lafayette every year for the past 5 or 6 years. The city's been on restricted flows because of lack of water in the summer, and Lafayette has water this summer. So he was, I mean, as a policy person, he's very elated, and everybody in Lafayette's got to be happy because they aren't, they got water all summer long to irrigate and do all of that. So.
No, I think staff did a great job of managing this thing. I was just trying to see if now that if we needed to, if,
Oh, those are great questions. Really.
They are good questions.
so
So do we need to read the resolution by title only and then do a motion on that? Then Sam is what you're thinking, and then
And then
If the commission is inclined or you to move on the motion, yeah, that's how that would be handled. That would be resolution 2020-18.
well, we
Yeah,
need,
if you're-
I'm sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
So we need to move on it now because we need to finalize the price before the payments start to be due, right?
Right, that's another issue for you to keep in mind is I think John was very, very motivated and probably pushed James pretty hard to get this done. So we could get a final cost to Lafayette because under the contract, their first payment will be due August 1. So if we give them notice of final cost.
And James and John, we don't have any other possible costs lurking out there that we need to be sure we identify before we give them this notice, right?
Yeah, all costs have been accounted for.
Okay, great.
And I've talked to Preston and he's ready to pay the first payment, so.
So do we do this all contingent on Ed looking at it?
So
Dated?
after, Sandra, will this work if after you read the resolution, I move that we adopt it and approve it subject to staff reviewing where the valves were changed with Commissioner Gormley and him being satisfied that it would not be appropriate to approach Lafayette for a modification concerning these of price or payment concerning these valves.
That would, as long as Commissioner Gormley is willing to accept that charge, that we can certainly.
what happens if I come back and say, I think we should put a valve in here and we need to have money for it?
And then I think we would then direct staff to negotiate with Lafayette.
Okay. And I'm sure I would have, I mean, from a PR standpoint, it would probably be good for me to be engaged in that. Not trying to do the staff's work, but just.
Yeah, well, you're going to work with staff on this and make the decision.
Okay.
All right, so that'll be a resolution. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
Do you want me to read the title at this point?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 2020-18, resolution authorizing and approving a change order between K&E Excavating, Inc. and the city of McMinnville acting by and through its Water Light Commission, and final contract price, payment for engineering services, and issuance of final cost to the city of Lafayette. That's by title only.
Okay.
And I understand it's being, the motion includes what Commissioner Tankersley described as a condition of review by Commissioner Gormley in consultation with staff to approve the elimination of the valves in question.
So do I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Wait, yeah, okay. And to make sure to clarify the conditions on this, it would be, I would assume that what would happen would be that if we, that we would then come back and discuss what we're going to do whether we need to have a change order that doesn't include this and the contract then just requires them to install it when the valves are ready or whatever is necessary on that, okay? Or do we ask Lafayette to promise to pay if it's necessary to install the valves? And listening to Ed, it sounds as if that's probably not going to be necessary or appropriate, but I think we need to keep that door open since we don't really know.
Well, I'm confident in John and James's actions and stuff. So anyway, I'll confirm everything.
Again, there's no question that they did the right thing. The only question is,
Yeah, whether we need to be reimbursed eventually.
we need to be reimbursed eventually.
Okay.
So I second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'll turn over to Trina to poll the commission.
Mayor Hill,
Yes?
Commissioner Tankersley,
Yes.
Commissioner Gormley,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuchs. Thumbs
Is-
up, yes. Commissioner Christensen.
Yes.
And so resolution number 2020-18 passes unanimous. Thank you for those.
Mayor, I have to leave the meeting. So I thank you, everyone. I
Good seeing you,
appreciate
Jody.
it. Thanks.
Good seeing
Take
you.
care.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
That takes us to under new business E, which is CARES Act subgrant agreement. And so we'll turn that over to Mark.
Thank you. So this evening for commission consideration is a resolution approving a subgrant between the city of McMinnville and Water and Light to provide funding from the CARES Act grant for COVID-19 expense reimbursement through May 15th of this year. A subgrant is needed because Water and Light cannot be a direct grant recipient for the CARES Act funds because we're neither a city nor a special district as defined by ORS 198. This is something we learned after we made our submission for those May 15th expenses, or expenses through May 15th. The resolution also directs Water and Light Legal Counsel to prepare an amendment to the subgrant agreement to request expense reimbursement through June 30th, so our second expense request. These expenses would then be included with the city's coronavirus relief fund expense reimbursement request that they'll submit later this week. So yesterday, 2 updates to the staff report were provided. One was the subgrant agreement itself. That was an omission on my part. I apologize for that. It should have been in the packet. The other was an update to our 6/30 expense reimbursement request that includes some additional expenses. Those expenses were payroll costs for Water and Light employees who were dedicated to our COVID-19 response, and they totaled $12,791. In the coronavirus relief fund guidance, payroll expenses for employees that are substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to public health qualify for reimbursement. There's also an indication in the guidance that the COVID-19 work performed by employees must be outside of their normal job responsibility in order to qualify for reimbursement. Unfortunately, the guidance is not overly clear on this. Water and Light's payroll expenses meet the substantially dedicated criteria, but they may not meet the substantially different criteria, and therefore could be disallowed as a result of a CARES Act audit at a future date. If that occurred, Water and Light would be required to return those funds. So this evening, what is being requested from staff is for commission consideration of approval of the subgrant agreement that includes expenses through May 15th, and then an amendment authorizing Water and Light Legal Counsel to put together a amended subgrant that includes expenses through June 30th. So that would be an Exhibit 2A as opposed to 2A, or I'm sorry, as opposed to Exhibit 2. So, and then direction on whether or not the commission is comfortable with submitting the payroll expenses in the amount of $12,781 when the guidance is not overly clear. So that's what
I personally think you should do it. And anybody that's looked at some of the PPP language, I'm told that maybe by the end of the year we'll know what, for businesses, you'll know what we're supposed to do. So at this point, I think we should proceed. And if we got to pay it back, we got to pay it back. The other thing is, this resolution should be all encompassing to cover what Trina sent to us yesterday. Is that right, Sam?
Yeah, well, it covers the subgrant agreement, right? And it'll cover those, both the subgrant agreement and that 2A exhibit that was sent to you yesterday, yes.
So question, clearly we were concerned with our line crews intermingling and we lose the whole squad. So we dedicated money to create a separate facility to, quarantine, if you will, one crew against the other. Did we try and pick up any of those expenses related to building that building? Because it's really, COVID is what drove us to build that building, in my mind. but John, you want to correct me?
Yeah, that building was actually already planned.
Was it? Okay.
We accelerated the timing to get it done. The one thing that what I would say is that we're probably looking at some other expenses as far as like isolating the crew, and those expenses may be CARES Act reimbursable. And there's some trailer and some other stuff that we're looking at.
Okay, I'll shut up then. Okay.
So if Patrick didn't have a question, I have one about the payroll. Does the payroll expense include our extra overtime and such because we isolated the crews and separated them, the line crews or the water crews?
Does not. The COVID response, the fact that we separated them and had them available to maintain, assurance that we would be able to have crews responding if we had an outbreak in one of the crews, because the crews that were home we weren't able to get those covered because they actually weren't doing COVID-19 work. They were part of that response, but because they weren't working on COVID work, they didn't qualify.
So being available, kind of isolating and being available wasn't considered COVID work.
Right.
What was considered COVID work?
Yeah, it's not intuitive.
Thank you.
That's a legal term, Tom. Did you know that, intuitive? Or is that an accounting term? Oh, accounting, I'm sorry.
It's accounting term, yes.
Yeah, so they would have to actually be doing something, constructing something that examples in the guidance are constructing a care facility or,
Temporary power, things like that. Yeah.
So we had $12,000 of stuff that fit in the guidance, we thought.
Yes. Yeah. It was for our policy response and all of the work that we did related to personnel.
Right.
We handled our personnel through this crisis.
Okay. You're right. It's not intuitively obvious that somebody standing by that we're paying somebody to stand. It's an expense out of our pocket. We wouldn't have to pay if we weren't doing that, but that isn't part of the guidance. Okay, I get it. I mean, I don't think I get it. I understand you guys have read it and understand it. So
To the best of their understanding.
We've read it many times.
So any further discussion?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay, Sam, would you read this resolution by title?
Hey, this is resolution number 2020-19, a resolution authorizing and approving a sub-grant agreement between the City of McMinnville and the City of McMinnville-Acton through its Water Line Commission, provide funding from the CARES Act grant.
I move for the adoption.
Been moved and Patrick second. Good. All in favor, please, well, no. Could you poll the commission?
Yes, Mayor Hill,
Yes.
Commissioner Tankersley,
yes.
Commissioner Gormley,
Yes.
and Commissioner Fuchs.
And
Thumbs
his-
up, got it.
Okay, resolution 2020-19 passes unanimously. That takes us to our last piece of new business this evening, which is an intergovernmental agreement with the Department of Transportation. James, if you could update us on this.
All right, thank you. So this is with an intergovernmental agreement. It's with ODOT they call it an added work agreement. We have an attached resolution to it. Basically, they're going to be going out on 99 and ODOT will be doing a project. They contacted us and we reviewed it. It'll be taking place in a year or so. We have our utility in there right away. So based on that, we have some valve boxes that need to be adjusted out there and some additional work that would be done within their contract. And most of it, when I say additional work, it's just basically adjusting valve boxes out there when they're doing restoration work and doing that paving back. So this is the agreement they have. I talked to them in depth in regards to their actual agreement, and this is pretty much what they do with all jurisdictions when they have capital projects down here. So this is what they would need signed for them to adjust those boxes for us. And they have an engineer's estimate on there that we're responsible to pay back. By signing this, we basically are obligated to pay back the work they perform within that contract. The $5,500 is an engineer's estimate that an ODOT engineer came up with, and that includes their work as well. And it also says on there, their specs are very similar to ours. It's, by American and so forth. They won't be actually putting in any material, they'll just be adjusting it. And I'm looking for commission to award it or authorize the mayor to sign it, and we can proceed forward with this project.
Thank you,
So James, have you taken this off yourself just to look at what the value is? Is there $5,500 worth of work there? Or?
It's actually under that, from what I saw. I was surprised it was so high.
But it's a number that they're sticking, I got to be careful with my language here. They've determined a value that McMinnville Water and Light's going to pay to raise because we're in there right away.
Right.
We got to raise our valve boxes and things. It must be a paving project or something, or?
It's a paving project, and they're doing, so the work consists of, it's out on Highway 99 from McDonald, heading out towards the steel mill there, towards Lafayette Avenue. And what they're doing is they're going to be doing a grind and inlay, sidewalk restoration, ADA upgrades out there as well. And a portion of I think a majority of our line is out behind or in the sidewalk or behind the sidewalk. And it's just adjusting those valve boxes as they go through and do construction work. We also have a project that's going to tie into that before their project, hopefully. Well, it will be, and we'll replace a portion of our old cast main out there. So we're trying to coordinate with them. The $5,500, I mean, it's an estimate. So speaking with ODOT, it could be under, it could be a little over. I mean, they don't give you an exact amount. The number is what it is when the bids come in. And that's how it works. So.
Okay. Okay. Well, we don't have much choice, do we? I mean, this is a small enough amount that they don't want us bothered.
It makes it feel any better. I tried getting out of it, but this is it. They're making us sign it. So if we want the work done, this is the document that needs to be signed. And my recommendation is, I mean, we'll work with them. The work's gonna be performed at night, but
bite your lip and pay.
My recommendation is we sign it and move forward, and I'll track it and we'll go from there.
Let's hope that they don't come back with a $7,500 bill too. Because it's a year from now.
It's a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, they've got us. There's no two ways about it. So we're in there right away. Is this a resolution or? Yeah, it is. Okay.
James, real quickly, I think you've done the right thing, or you're going to have a choice, but if we're talking about, 50,000 or 200,000, could we self-perform it for them? Or is the coordination just too difficult?
Well, the coordination's at night. So the answer is yes, we could self-perform it. Do we want to self-perform it? We don't, because you're interfering with contractors, and you don't want to do a stop work or slow work. You got to be out there as they go through. Yeah. They have their own methods of doing it. The coordination, it's worth just piggybacking onto their contract and having it done with an ODOT contractor, and they'll get a quality contractor to do the work. That's not a concern. It's just it's one more thing to track and then make sure we follow through with it. So.
Okay, great. I was thinking for in the future if there was a big project, but it sounds
we're doing a large project. The 3 Mile Bridge is an ODOT project. We're working to the city on it, but that's something we're coordinating with them on. So we have large projects, but I'm not sure how that typically ties into it. John, have we done a large project before with ODOT that you're aware of?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think we have.
Okay.
But this is a precursor to what's going to be happening on the bridge, which is a large project over a large part of time period.
Yeah, that one it would be pretty difficult for us to self-perform.
You say it would be very difficult for us to self-perform?
On the bridge.
Yeah, we don't want, that's a terrible working condition.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
We don't want to expose our employees to that.
And so Bridge will have a contract, won't we, with the
yeah.
Just like we're doing on the Old Sheridan Road.
Yep.
There'll be a price.
There'll be line items and stuff that we'll be able to see all this.
Okay,
Correct.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
So, but to answer your question, if it was like a $50,000 project and we had to team up with ODOT, it would be much simpler to coordinate the project with them than us to go out and perform the work and coordinate with a contractor.
Okay, okay, thank you, James.
Okay, Sam, will you read this?
Right. This is Resolution 2020-20, a resolution authorizing and approving a letter agreement between the state of Oregon acting by and through its Department of Transportation and the city of McMinnville acting by and through its Water Line Commission to relocate utilities.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded.
Second,
And Trina, can you pull the commission?
Mayor Hill,
Yes?
Commissioner Tankersley,
yes,
Commissioner Gormley,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuchs. Thumbs up. Got it.
And so resolution 2020-20 passes unanimously. Okay, that takes us to executive session. And so Trina, could you allow those into executive session that need to be a part of that?